While the rest of the playoff contenders battle it out, the Georgia Bulldogs are waiting, watching weaknesses, watching who is going to be strong enough to survive December. I'm Keegan, my co-host is Chito, and we are back for another episode of Dogs Off the Leash.
I do it for the dogs.
Best time of the year, my guy.
Indeed, bro. It's all the games, all the little moments, all the big moments. If you're a Georgia fan and your season is still relevant at this point in December, you're sitting pretty high on the hog. So
yeah, well, listen, we're not in college anymore, obviously, but students are wrapping up their finals, getting ready for Christmas break. If you're in a fantasy league, you're either a part of the playoffs or your season is over. In the NFL, teams are fighting for position, and it's really chaotic in the college space right now. Not only do you have NIL putting people in the transfer portal, new coaching hires, the coaching carousel, which has been outrageous this time around, but there's a vibe that's kind of shifted in college football, right? Last year, the first four teams didn't really feel like they were championship worthy. They've made a few changes to the structure of the CFP format this year to where the top four seeds get in. It's not always about conference championships. I feel like Indiana, Georgia, and Ohio State all have legitimate chances to be NCAA champions this year. Texas Tech, debatable. We'll see how they perform on this stage. Even in the NFL, you don't have Patrick Mahomes and them going to the playoffs. Joe Burrow and his team are struggling this year. Even the Philadelphia Eagles are having a down year. So there's going to be some new champions in both the professional and the college league. And I love playoff season, so I'm hyped, especially if your team is in the hunt to win a title.
Rewinding back to last year, it really felt like Georgia was a recipient of the rust, not the rest, when we played Notre Dame. And it seemed like the whole entire trend of those second round games kind of leaned towards the rust part of it being seen more so than the rest part of it. Where are you at in that conversation, and do you think Georgia is set up for an advantage this season versus last season? Like, was it a fluke? Where are you at on the rest versus rust spectrum?
Yeah, this is the popular question that comes up every year, and for good reason. Because, again, last year, every single team that had a bye, the first four teams, all got knocked out. So the argument between rest versus rust, you hear that same thing in the NBA when they have their playoffs, NFL, same thing. But if you take a little bit of a closer look and add the context to last year, you had Boise State, a team that won their conference. They had Ashton Genty, but they weren't really a talented team. You had UGA, who was a talented team, but Gunnar Stockton hadn't started prior to the game against Notre Dame, who ends up going to play for the championship. You have Oregon, who loses to Ohio State, who was the champion. And then you have Texas, who ends up beating Arizona State. They had a good season with Cam Scatterbo, but they were not as talented as Texas. So you have to add that context. I think it's going to be a little bit different this year. I think Georgia's in a prime position. Defense is playing well. Offense is playing well. And Mike Bobo has been a revelation this year. I know you wanted to give him credit, and he deserves it. Making the Broyles Award list, I believe. He's really done everything he's wanted to with the weapons at his disposal. We can do it through the air. We can do it on the ground. Our offensive line has been as good as those championship years. So this year, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas Tech is the only team I think that may struggle with their first round, but not because of rust, simply because I think Oregon's going to have a chance to knock them out. So it's going to be interesting. If we see a lot of the teams that had the byes get knocked off this year, then a lot of people are going to think maybe it's not so important that we have a first round bye or that we win our conference championship or whatever it takes to get that top four seed. So it's going to be a conversation, but we got to see how it all plays out.
I think it has more to do with the year-to-year shakeout, what your team's looking like in the present tense, and then how does the bracket favor you or hamper you, right? Like if we started off with a home game versus JMU going into maybe the easier of the top four byes, we're really enjoying the way things shook out. Then again, if you're sitting at home at this time of the year, but the team you're likely to play is probably like maybe the media favorite or kind of the on-paper champion, so to speak, then things are not shaking out as favorably. And that really is going to vary year to year. Georgia, what they are doing right is converging at the right time. Everything we need to be getting better is seemingly growing throughout the season. I'd like to see Gunnar Stockton turn it back on for another big game moment when we do get to see the Dogs play. And I'm not taking anything away from Gunner, but seemingly everything else has trended up majorly week over week. So I like what I'm seeing from Georgia. And how about Mike Bobo and this staff? Going back to the beginning of last season, Mike Bobo is announced as the head full-time offensive coordinator again, and immediately, myself included, I questioned the decision. There were people who were saying Kirby just hires his friends, which seemed like a stretch, but was arguably true that they're buds. And a lot of Georgia fans, understandably, wanted the sexy hire, and for the majority of the Georgia fans who had been around since the Mark Richt days, who oftentimes found Bobo as the easy, low-hanging fruit villain to blame for when things didn't go right, and sometimes understandably, sometimes the criticism was understandable because Mike Bobo was so conservative and had kind of earned that reputation, admittedly. There was a kerfuffle. And even though we ended up winning the SEC championship going into this season, myself included, we're still quick to blame Bobo. But that was then. This is now. Mike Bobo has turned it on, and I've seen nothing but progress from this offensive staff in general. And he's done an excellent job of utilizing the talent that we have and coming up with these game plans that as soon as you get to know my moves, that's where we trick you. That's where we key out of it. That's where we
breaking tendencies. He's done a great job with that.
They've done an excellent job of lulling the defense to sleep and capitalizing on big plays. Mike Bobo was known to do that even back in the Mark Richt days because of the conservative play call at times. So this has just been a masterclass. And if you're Mike Bobo, Chito, don't tell me this offensive staff hasn't been full of some inside jokes or something where they're like, I wonder if they want to fire you now, coach, because
yeah,
you hear the chatter. So if you're a part of this staff, like at some level, you want to like probably check the message boards, read the comments a little bit because fans were frustrated, but seemingly the the group of people that was trying to run Mike Bobo out of town has seemingly gotten quieter and quieter.
And look, it was fair because for a long time, even last year, we won the SEC, but it felt like we depended on the defense in order to do that. That Mike Bobo just had to have a pulse, that any offensive coordinator with the talent that Georgia has could have done the same thing. But when you look at this year and you look at a lot of the games early on to the midseason, that Tennessee game, Mike Bobo helped us stay in a position to win that game. The defense gave up 40 points. We went to overtime. The dagger on the 4th and 6, like all of that takes a gutsy offensive coordinator to get it done. We really got annoyed at the amount of bubble screens that we ran this year. But lo and behold, we might run bubble screens better than anybody in the country. You know what I mean? We executed and it worked. And to that point, people want to talk about how Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey weren't healthy, you know, in their last year when we lost the SEC championship. You look at the Tennessee game, you look at Ole Miss. That was because our offense kept us in those games. When our secondary was struggling, when we could not get a pass rush, when people were complaining about Glenn Schumann. Now we've kind of shorted up on the defensive side of the ball. And I've always said as a Georgia program, and it makes sense for every program, but for Georgia specifically, our best years is when we are really good to elite on not just one side of the ball, but on both sides. And more times than not, it's been defense with the offense just kind of dragging along. We've got our offense playing at this really, really high level, and now the defense has caught up. So, again, I will criticize Bobo when I feel like the game plan's vanilla, when I feel like he's not seeing it for what it is, or he's playing too conservative for first downs instead of attacking the defense for touchdowns and field goal position. But he has earned all of the praise that he has earned this year. This offense is a well-oiled machine, and it's because they've made a conservative effort to get back to the ground game, which opens up everything else. The screen game, the extension of the run. If you bite on the screens, he'll throw a fake screen at you. His end-around games. He's got Gunner now who can pull off of all of these actions, which adds a different dimension. So the dual threat ability of Gunner, I think, has really helped Bobo as well, because as good as Carson Beck is as a pro-style quarterback, he limits what you can do offensively, which gives just defense another answer to whatever it is that you're doing. Gunner eliminates a lot of that. And we've seen a lot of big scrambles and a lot of rushing touchdowns out of Gunner because of people keying on what Georgia typically is. So yeah, shout out to Bobo. Got to give him love for that.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about Gunner's development is not where he can run the ball, but how he's choosing to do so at a wiser and wiser clip. And he's not just pulling just to pull. So that's really cool. And speaking of Gunner Stockton, the side note news of the week for me was that the college football video game NCAA 26 has finally come out with their last updated rendition to the roster, and Gunner Stockton finally breached an A rating, A-, mind you, but he ended up with a 90, and that is a far cry from the 82 that he started with. So for my Georgia football gamers out there, this is a big deal because you want to play with Georgia every game, granted, but when your quarterback doesn't have the speed that he's supposed to and the and the deep throwing accuracy that he's supposed to, you really have some gritty wins and you really have to earn it in a more conservative fashion. So I immediately put 100 yards rushing on the board in an online match like it was nothing with the new speedy Gonzalez Gunner. So shout out to NCAA getting it right. You guys took way too long, but it makes it a little bit easier to talk trash to your football playing contemporaries. But the cool thing about that is that it gives a little bit more realistic viewpoint of how the Georgia offense can flourish. And it's just so hard to stop a team that has that ability to pull it, do the QB run. And Gunner has just shown himself to be a quite durable runner. So knock on wood, but I don't think Gunner's going to start learning to slide anytime soon. And I don't want us running it for 40 times with Gunner, but I really do like how reliable he's shown himself to be basically as an extra back. And it's cool to see him actually well represented in the video game for once, finally.
Keegan, I think Gunner's going to be really pivotal, really vital to our success this year. But I'd love to kind of switch over and talk a little bit about the bracket and how things have lined up. If you have a bracket pulled up and you want to share your screen or something, feel free to do that. I think both UGA and Ohio State are the real favorites to win this. So as we go through this first round, second round, I think there are a couple games that are really going to determine who wins this. Obviously, if we see Georgia and Ohio State, you can pretty much consider that the championship, in my opinion, barring injuries. But the first round matchup that is going to be on Saturday, we have number 12, James Madison, traveling to Eugene, Oregon to take on the Ducks and Dan Lanning.
The thing about this, obviously, everyone's going to want to lean Oregon, including myself. But if you look at James Madison's schedule, their one loss was to a Louisville team that has proven dangerous throughout the season. Louisville was able to beat a top 10 Miami team. They absolutely demolished Kentucky 42-0. So that's something unto itself. And when Clemson actually was starting to play decent, they probably should have won that game, and they lost by 0.2 to a still sloppy and not that good of a Clemson team, but obviously very talented, lots of recruits. Anyway, that's what Louisville did. That's the watermark you got to compare them to. That was the one loss they had. I think James Madison played clean football throughout the year to make this game closer. I'm still going Oregon, but I think James Madison, if you want to look at the two group of 5 teams, immediately it's easier to shit on James Madison, but I actually think they are going to be the second best team that's Oregon's played all year. Oregon on top for that one, but James Madison's actually is a lot better of a team than I think people are giving them credit for. What do you think?
Yeah, give me Oregon. I don't want to overthink this one too much. I think Oregon's a really good roster, a really good team, a really good program. Dan Lanning's going to have them prepared. And going to Oregon to play, all these first-round teams that are playing at home are going to have a huge advantage. So give me Oregon as well. Moving on to one of the better matchups, a rematch, if you will. We have Alabama going to Norman, Oklahoma to take on a healthy offense and one of the best defenses to close the regular season in Oklahoma. Keegan, how are you feeling about this matchup between number 9 Alabama and number 8 Oklahoma?
A couple of things. So Alabama hasn't lost to a team twice in the same season since like the 1800s. Typically, they win rematches, and typically Alabama's just used to winning, period, right? But Oklahoma probably has the most trending unit of any team, I would say. I think the Oklahoma defense is probably the strongest single unit. And this time they've got Mateer kind of trending. The offense is doing a little bit better. And they're playing at home. So while I think that Alabama will course correct, they probably aren't used to losing back-to-back, and they're going to really bring it, and it'll be a lot more competitive game. Oklahoma's got just as many good reasons to think they're going to pull this one out, and they're playing in Norman. Give me the Sooners, dude.
Yeah, I'm going with the same thing. Brent Venables in that defensive unit that you mentioned have been outstanding. Alabama wasn't healthy enough to compete with Georgia the way they normally do in the SEC championship game. I think they're still going to be banged up going into this. And the blueprint, even though Oklahoma's already beaten Alabama, the blueprint is out. They cannot run the ball, and they are going to be one-dimensional, and that is going to allow Oklahoma in this front seven and that secondary to tee off, to play a lot of coverage, and to make Tyson Simpson beat them on his own, which is hard enough already. So I'm going Sooners. I know it's not a popular pick. The Alabama fans are going to hate that, but that's kind of what I see, and that's where I'm going.
I think it makes sense. I mean, it won't surprise me if Alabama wins. I do think that this is kind of an unfair matchup for the SEC because you got two teams that really could probably make a deep playoff run if they had the easier shake of things, if they got dealt a better hand, so to speak. But yeah, it's just hard to ignore Oklahoma and what they've done as a unit so consistently. Like maybe Georgia's the better team. Maybe Ohio State has the most dangerous offense at times. Maybe. I think they're overrated, but it's hard to argue that the Oklahoma defense doesn't deserve their flowers. But that brings us to a game that Georgia fans will obviously be keyed in on, and that is Tulane versus Ole Miss. You got all this news about, if I'm pronouncing it right, John Summerall. He seems to be creating a lot less drama, and a lot more positive vibes are going out to his transition and how he's handling things. Ole Miss is kind of stepping into a new lane, pun intended. So does Ole Miss have what it takes to do what they're supposed to do on paper and beat Tulane, or is Tulane looking to take advantage of the drama on the Ole Miss side? Ole Miss, Tulane, who you got?
Tulane's a really good team. It is a shame that they're having to go through a similar thing to Ole Miss is, where the head coach is moving on, but it does seem like there's a little bit more positive vibes. But looking back to the first matchup, as this is a rematch again, Ole Miss blew the doors off of Tulane. They have a really good offense, both teams, Tulane and Ole Miss. There will be some questions about if Chaz Chambliss enters the transfer portal, so he may not play in this game, and it may be Austin Simmons, I believe his name is, who we know is a good quarterback. But what I see in Ole Miss right now is their new head coach in Pete Golding, a defensive-minded guy. I think that's what Ole Miss has needed for a long time. They've always been that high-powered team that gives up a lot of points as well. But now you have a defensive-minded guy who's going to be in there trying to slow down Tulane. I think Ole Miss, their offense is going to be fine regardless of who is the quarterback, and I think that they roll again. And the fact that it's in Oxford, again, gives them a lot of benefits and to what could have been a closer matchup if it would have been anywhere else. Tulane's already lost to Ole Miss. I see Ole Miss taking the dub again.
Yeah, dude, it's hard to not pick the home team when it seems like the home team has the on-paper advantage as is.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm with you, though. I think having a defense being more defensive-minded and having more control with the clock is going to benefit any team that doesn't have as much seniority or experience in the quarterback position, especially if you're like Ole Miss and you have one of the best running back rooms in college football. So I think that actually sets up well with how they could play. And even though Lane Kiffin loves to run a fast-paced, high-powered offense, I think his actual roster this season is catered towards more of a clock control, more defensive-minded team. So we might actually see an uptick just based on the style of play change, even though I think all things being equal, Lane Kiffin is probably a better, more elite head coach with more impact. But yeah, I think this Ole Miss team could really work well with the new direction. So yeah, I like Ole Miss in this one. It'll be interesting to see how many Group of 5 teams kind of state their case, because they're honestly playing for a lot more than just this game. There's so much disrespect and shade being thrown at these Group of 5 teams that it's almost like they're representing all of Group of 5 football all in one. So we're gonna
and people get upset, but the talent level the disparities are there. So you know what? When one of these teams, again, i.e. Boise State last year, Tulane this year, James Madison, when one of these teams wins and makes a deep run, then we'll consider the possibility that these teams belong here. But until then, I think it's okay just to be like, they're outmatched. Doesn't mean they won't win, but they are outmatched. If you're willing to put your money on them, go crazy. But don't be upset if you lose every dollar you've ever earned. So, it is what it is. And then obviously for Georgia, it's going to be important because the winner of this game will face Georgia. Tulane would be an outmatched team, coaching-wise and roster-wise. Ole Miss would be a lot more of a challenge, but Georgia is already very familiar. And Kirby's going to prepare his team probably better than any other team in the country. So, again, Georgia would be favored, but we'll talk about the quarterfinals matchups once those are all set. And then moving on to the last first round game. I'm hearing a lot of buzz and a lot of people that want to take Miami here. I will say they have a really nice front four. They have some of the highest rated edge players and D linemen in the country, but they're going to have to travel to Aggie Land, take on the 12th man, and take on a quarterback who, while he didn't finish with Heisman consideration, I think Marcel Reed is a Heisman caliber type of quarterback. He can take over a game with both his arm and his legs. Their defense and their secondary were rated with some of the best metrics a secondary can have throughout the season: third down conversion, yards allowed through the air. And I think Carson Beck is going to be prone to make some mistakes here. So in the first round, I'm going to take Texas A&M to move on and take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Keegan, how are you feeling about this first round matchup? I know a lot of people want to see Carson Beck find his way to play Georgia for that storyline.
Oh, that could be interesting. Yeah, I think Miami is being a little bit overlooked from us SEC folk. I think that Texas A&M had a great season, but the way their schedule shook out, really one of the only true tough tests they had was Texas, and they lost that game. And while Miami definitely looks a little bit more shaky in terms of how their season went, they played some really strong games, and it's hard to argue they don't have better top-level talent. Maybe Texas A&M is the better team, but top-level talent, I think I'm leaning Miami. So, it's on the road, though, dude, in the SEC. But you know what? There's so much vitriol and hate and downcasting towards Carson Beck. I think I would just love it if Carson Beck turned up, had a huge game, 400-yarder on the road. It's probably not going to happen. But, dude, give me Miami, because something about this team, I argued for them to get in the playoff for this very reason. I think they're dangerous enough where they could make a push. And when this team is clicking, they have the right top-level, tip-of-the-spear type of guys to beat anyone. It's just that they haven't played with that consistency. But I don't know. I'm going Miami here. I'm going Miami.
Yeah, and a lot of people are, and just like I said, there's a lot of buzz around them. People want to pick them, but in all honesty, I think Texas A&M was the second best team in the SEC this year. I really do. They beat Notre Dame, who was a good team that got left out. Miami played in the ACC and couldn't even make their conference championship game in a just god-awful conference. So I don't have a lot of confidence in them. And then again, Carson Beck being a predominantly pocket passer, I think that's going to have a bit of an impact when he's facing this defense, a defense he has not seen in the ACC. And I think what that is going to allow is for the most important game in the quarterfinals, and we won't break that down this week. We'll save that for next week. But Texas A&M versus Ohio State. I think that game is the most important for Georgia, because I think if Texas A&M can beat Miami, and I think they're good enough to take down Ohio State, maybe force an overtime game at the very least, I think that can decide whether Georgia wins a third national championship under Kirby Smart or if Ohio State goes back-to-back. So that is going to be one of my main points of emphasis when we start to break down the quarterfinals next week. And Georgia will be playing on January 1st. So a lot of football to be played, but I think this sets up really good for Georgia. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and somehow I know my logic is flawed, because on the one hand, I want to pick Miami because for some reason I think they can beat Texas A&M, but on the other hand, it seems like obvious that Texas A&M would be a better matchup against Ohio State. So please, guys, do not count on my pick for that last one. I think I made a lot more sense otherwise, but something just wants me to go Miami, and I think honestly it's all the Georgia fans who just have decided they hate Carson Beck. I'm still rooting for him at some level, and to me, I know there's people who will say, dude, you got to go Texas A&M. They're an SEC team. Like, since 2 years ago or something, you know what I mean? Like, since just a handful of years ago. So,
yeah, and that's fair. I'm trying to stay away from narratives because the media would love a Carson Beck Georgia showdown. So, I mean, you can, with brackets, whether it's college basketball, NFL, whatever, you can take the narrative, but I'm trying to look at it at a purely football standpoint. And I think Texas A&M is literally one of the best coached and most talented teams in the country. I truly believe that.
Okay, I give you that. I think they're right there too. And Mike Elko probably is getting slept on, but Miami has a ton of talent. Is it Kadarius Toney? Is that the Miami guy? And they got the defense.
Yeah, he's a great receiver.
I don't know, like the top 8 guys at Miami are as good as just about anybody, I gotta think. So that's kind of why I want to lean on them. They're a great video game team, if you guys know how I like to phrase that. So another little tidbit of leaked audio came out with Kirby going off at practice. But how about Georgia's ability to stay hungry right now in this period? How important is that to getting to that next level, really vying for another national championship? Because at one point in the season, let's say game 3 or 4, all the frustrations and things that we had to work on, I feel like we've worked on them and really improved them and just about checked every one of those boxes where we were frustrated and had concern. That is ironically the perfect recipe to be satisfied, for Georgia fans not to worry, for the players to say, hey, we're doing it, for the staff to say, look, guys, we've made those improvements. So with that being the groundwork, Georgia's got to stay hungry, and who better than Kirby Smart to be able to keep them hungry? I cracked up. I think it was Kurt Cignetti, and in his post-game celebration interview, the sports reporter asked him, so what are you focused on now? And as the confetti's falling and they're basically on top of the world, he's like, I got to figure out how to make these guys hungry again and, not have such big egos, because it's like,
No, for sure. And I think that's going to be one of the things that I'm really looking for, right? The way I said Oregon is a team that has kind of been building this. Oklahoma, they haven't won a national championship in a long time, but that fan base, that program knows what it means to win titles. I'm looking for those teams to really excel. The Georgias, the Ohio State, who won last year. Nothing against Texas Tech, nothing against Indiana, but this is going to be a big stage for them, right? Playing your first game, Mendoza's the Heisman winner. You're going to be going to the Rose Bowl and having to deliver against either Alabama or Oklahoma. That is going to be big. So it's hard to quantify, especially with all these moving pieces and injuries and transfer portal, who's going to come out on top. But I think a strong foundation, a good program, great coaching, and having been there before, I think are really going to set the stage for who are going to win these games when the margins are so thin and college football talent has maybe not neutralized, but reached a little bit more of a level playing field. So in that context, that's kind of why I'm leaning with the teams that I'm leaning to. And I'm going to have an article come out previewing my entire bracket that I did for ESPN and kind of a little bit of tidbit as to why, the strengths of each team, and what I'm kind of leaning on. And you're going to see the same themes present themselves over and over again. And I think that's kind of what football boils down to. I'm not going to hit on everything, but I'm hoping that consistency will show itself in my bracket.
Yeah, and I think if you go by the phrase defense wins championships, there are a lot of really talented defenses in this bracket, more so to me than last year. And on the flip side, there's a lot of really talented quarterbacks in this bracket. So those are the two things I'm looking for to see how far a team can go, their QB play and then their defensive play. Obviously, you win it in the trenches. You can look at every single position group. It's all a factor. It's a team sport. But those two things seem to really trend on how teams are going, and that's actually what makes this group of teams so unique and compelling to watch, because in NIL, every team is going to have at least a solid quarterback if they're a real playoff contender. So get your popcorn ready, and definitely looking forward to this slate of games. So Chito, it's been a blast. It's good to be back.
Yeah, in essence, we're about to get hit with a lot of good quality football. First, it'll be college football, and then it'll be NFL, and then again, we've talked a little bit about fantasy. We'll cover that as that goes, but Georgia's in a prime position. There's not many times that you have this draw to where you get a team that you're going to be favored against, and that the other real title contender has a lot of challenges before they get to you. So Georgia's in a prime position here, and I can't wait to watch it play out. And we're going to try to make sure that we stay on top of all of this. Y'all make sure that you check out the blog, check out our articles, check out our videos on social media. Keegan's out here pumping out all that good stuff, and we'll keep you posted. Keegan, always appreciate you, man. Dog Nation, it's a blast. Let's get ready for a deep playoff run. Make sure you catch us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that is Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, guys, you know what it is.
Off the leash.
Off
I do it for the dogs.